Okay, and we'll go ahead and share our screen. Okay, so if Maria, you want to let me know if you can see the PowerPoint presentation and not my slide notes.
I can see the PowerPoint.
Great. Okay. Well, I appreciate everybody showing up today. My name is Brad Stewart, and we are going to be talking about time management while you're doing class at home. And so this is a workshop that we give on a regular basis, but the topic is slightly different because of our situation is so not the normal. And so that's adding a lot of challenges, trying to figure out how we can be the most productive and optimal version of ourselves despite all of the challenges that we have. And so I appreciate you all being here. Ask questions at any time. Still open to having dialogue, even though it gets harder while we're doing this over Zoom. So if I was to ask you what the definition of somebody who has really good time management, what are some of those characteristics that you would say?
They always turn things on time. Like they are always
Okay.
like ahead of things.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So they're on their due dates.
They're organized.
Good. They're organized. I heard completes assignments on time, wakes up early. So I'd also say be prepared. I'm kind of part of that, like wakes up early. You're ready to go right at the moment. I think all of those are really good things to consider when we're talking about time management. Ultimately, time management is the ability to use one's time effectively or productively. And so that's what we need to focus on for this presentation. There's a lot of distractions out there. We're going to talk about this in a second. We need to be effective with our time because it's no longer we don't necessarily have the ability to just get to it whenever we get to it because there's a lot of challenges that we have. And so we need to be able to capitalize on the time that we have to be the most efficient version of ourselves for some of those times when maybe we have to balance family members being on calls. We're on calls. I can use the office at certain hours, but not at other times because I have a sibling who's taking classes as well, and we're kind of sharing. So you have to be more efficient. We have to allocate the right amount of time to the right activities. And this is an adage that holds true for all time management situations, but I think even more so now, again, because we have the ability to be distracted. And there's so many different things going on, and it's maybe a lot more work for some of our classes trying to translate those from in-person to online. And so you can get consumed either with distractions or you can get overly consumed with one class with all of the different things you have to do and pre-class videos or whatever it might be, and maybe that's not the right time to work on that because you have something else that's a higher priority. Lastly, it's ultimately we're being purposeful in our life, scheduling time to increase our productivity, being intentional in your actions rather than being passive. I think that's probably going to be one of the best things that we can take to heart over these next 5 weeks is being proactive about things rather than I saw procrastination in the chat, rather than procrastinating and then waiting till the last minute because there's just too many challenges for that to be our normal. So good time management enhances our productivity. Time management is a form of stress management. And so time stress is one of our biggest stressors. The number of assignments we have due, conflicting priorities, being two places at one time, not enough time to finish something, that all increases the anxiety and the stress around life. And so good time management skills will start to lower your stress levels. And ultimately, the better we're able to manage our time, the more focused we'll be able to be with our thoughts and our tasks at hand. So let's start just talking about what some of those issues are, some of the hardships, and all of that. So at no time do I want you to think that we're just minimizing the challenges that you all have. Many of us have moved back home. For some of us, that's across the country, or you're in a completely different country. There's huge setbacks and challenges with time zone differences. You're sharing now living space with parents, with siblings, maybe just roommates, but still that can be difficult even in itself when everybody is stay at home and nobody's really allowed to leave that much. You're starting to get on each other's nerves. Where is everybody going to find space to work and have class and study? That starts to get tricky. And our workstations are not ideal. I'm in my dining room, but other people don't necessarily have the luxury of a good workstation. All of those things are going to get in the way of time management and staying on task, focusing, being efficient, and being productive. Now, with that said, despite having a lot of challenges and stress and transition in our life, at times when we have really high levels of stress is when we can be our most productive. And this is a Yerkes-Dodson scale. Those are the individuals that came up with it. And ultimately, this just shows that when you have little to no stress in your life, our productivity is at its lowest, but our motivation is not there. We have higher levels of like mental fatigue, and depression, anxiety, mental health issues start to rise. When we have stress in our lives, it actually fuels us to work harder, to be more efficient and more effective. We have a ton of things on our to-do list, but we're able to work for longer periods of time, and we're able to get things done faster because we're using that stress as a motivator, and it kind of kicks our brain into a second level.
Okay. Oh, gotcha. And of course, her sister.
Warren, Yvonne, you're unmuted. Could you mute yourself?
I didn't know I got it.
Thank you. So just keep that in mind. There are stressors. We have a lot of stressors. But let's try to not let those stressors get in the way of our productivity and understand that despite the stress, we can still be productive, and it doesn't have to derail us to that, to a negative level. Now, with that said, we have to start with some basics. And we're kind of looking at a restart to a lot of the ways that we do our lives. Before we moved back home, and when things were relatively normal in our routines, we had set up our calendars, our to-do lists, our weekly planners, like all of these things. We kind of had our life organized, but a lot of that stuff may have changed. Your study times may have changed. Obviously, with time zones, class is going to be different, so your calendars start to look different. You need to refigure out how to manage your life. And that is kind of a big deal. That's a lot. But really what we need to first look at, what was it that you already had set up? Identify the things that have changed. So things that are no longer, things that just modified, due dates that changed. And then you need to rewrite all of your calendars, planners, schedules to whatever your new reality is. I think if we're trying to makeshift old calendars and schedules and just make up the difference with time zones, or just remember in our head, oh, this assignment changed and it's actually this and this and this, rather than writing it down or redoing a planner, that adds a lot of stress to ourselves to remember all that information. What that does is it derails us and it makes us slower. And it's a lot to remember and it adds pressure. And so if we're using this as a way to manage our stress, we need to try to reduce the number of things, the extra things that our brain has to think about, to worry about, because we already have enough things going on. So that's kind of step one. Step two, it's going to be really beneficial for you to try to find the best study spot possible. Obviously, quiet, out of the way places, really trying to be away from distractions. And so if that means that you have to have a conversation with your family and say, this is my schedule. I'm going to post it on the refrigerator at these times. I'm really going to need people to try to be quiet. I'm going to be on a Zoom class. I need to be able to hear, to pay attention. So please try not to bang or, whatever it is. As best as possible, trying to set boundaries, schedules, create an environment that is still similar to going to the classroom as best as possible. And then avoiding locations with distractions. So if, doing it in your kitchen is a nice, flat area, it's a good work, table to work at, but people are going to be walking past you constantly, that might be a major distraction for you. Same as if you were to go out on the patio. I know some students have been doing class out there. That could be really great. But is it more of a distraction to be outside because you're looking around, you're enjoying nature, you're seeing people walk, or you're hearing noises, things like that? Maybe that's not the smartest thing for your productivity. So you have to balance those two pieces. Lastly, for just some really basic changes, it's really important for us to give our brain time to get away from the computer, especially for those days that you might have back-to-back classes. That's a lot of computer time. It's a lot of paying attention to a Zoom class. When we're on campus, we have that 5 to 10 minutes to walk from class to class. We get outside, we get a little bit of movement, the atmosphere changes, the scenery changes, and that really has a great effect on our brain to keep us focused. And we need to try to keep that as best as possible, even when we're at home. So literally walk around your house, go outside for 5 minutes, go on the patio, walk back and forth, get a little bit of air. The same, use a passing period the same as if it was a true passing period if you were on class. Are there any questions or thoughts about any of what I've talked about so far? Okay. So let's look at, again, if we're going to start redoing our calendar, I have a sample calendar of what we would have had from a traditional day, and a lot of it will hold true, but maybe we'll be able to pinpoint some things that you can modify. So we still want to look at our days just as if they were the same if we were on campus. So we have our weekly calendar, we have our classes in there. That's the first thing that you start with. Put in all of those regular things that you do on an ongoing basis. So service might not be happening right now. You used to volunteer at Kinder Frogs regularly. Well, that's not happening. But is there some other thing that you're trying to do on a regular basis to keep connection, to keep community? Is it a regular Zoom meeting or Google Hangout with some friends, like every Monday morning or something like that? If that's the case, put that on your calendar. Just the same as if you put a regular obligation, service or volunteering or student organization, you would put that on your calendar on a normal week and day. So count that as an obligation that you'll be at, and you can't capitalize on that time for studying, for whatever else. So put it on your calendar, right? And so you're going to replace old things with maybe the new reality. Study time. This is really where we're going to, in these next 5 weeks, really have to be specific about where are we using our time and when are we doing it. Otherwise, our brains are going to be able just to, venture off. We get bored. We're not as motivated. I've been noticing that myself working at home. It's hard to kind of stay on task continuously for 8 hours a day, like it is when you're in the office or when you're in school. And so you really need to be more specific about this. So if you didn't put study times for an amount of time, and then within the actual meeting invite, open up that invite and write notes to yourself about what you want to study and for how long. Again, we need to be much more focused on how are we using our time so we can be efficient with maybe the shorter period of times when we're having to compete for bandwidth with other family members, or whatever our situation is. So again, if you have a block of time and you're like, this would be a really great time to study for econ, awesome. Write that on your calendar and then open the invite and write study for econ for 45 minutes. It's an hour and a half time, but at least for 45 minutes, you're working on econ. Then you can spend the rest of the time working on your lit class or chemistry or whatever class is needed, but at least you're going to be studying every time, Tuesdays, 9:30 for econ for 45 minutes, right? Those are less decisions that your brain has to make on a regular basis. It's going to focus your attention. It's going to tell you what to do, when to do it. And you're not going to have to rely on yourself to remember all of the things, which starts to get exhausting when you're already navigating remote classes and being in a different environment and all that. Are there any thoughts or questions about how calendaring in today's time might be different, or need some help? Okay. So I'm going to share my screen with another view, and I've already pulled up the video, so I hope this works. Also, I need to switch my mic volume so you hear the video, and so I'll ask Yvonne if you want to just write in the chat once they start the video if you can hear the sound. Otherwise, and we'll go ahead and get started that way. So this first one is how to hack your to-do list so that we can make it work for us. So hopefully you can see the screen, and then let me know if you cannot hear.
So I was talking with David Allen, author of the book Getting Things Done, about how to be more organized. And he asked me,
why do you keep a calendar?
Because if I don't, I'll forget where I'm supposed to be and when.
That's right. Your head can't handle that complexity. And it's like the complexity of your calendar. Try the complexity of the rest of your life. If your calendar manages maybe 3 to 4% of your commitments and what you actually need to keep track of.
The other 96%, David says, are things like our goals, our projects, our to-do lists, what we need at the store, that phone call we need to make, all these other things we just let our brain, our psyche, try to keep track of.
The psyche actually sucks as a system. It'll remind you of stuff that you can't do at 3 o'clock in the morning, which is not very bright. If that was just one thing, that'd be bad enough. But multiply that by about 1,000 and realize this buzz that's going on in everybody's head.
So David thinks we need a new system that captures that buzz and quiets your brain. The first step in this system is to get everything written down.
So capturing it, that's a first critical step. That is, I've got to identify those things that are potentially meaningful. Otherwise, my psyche is going to go, don't forget, don't forget, don't forget, don't forget, don't forget. And this little monkey's going to start to talk inside my head.
But just writing things down isn't enough, because
if you look at most people's to-do lists, you see things like mom or bank. So you have to take it the next step. So now you've got to clarify what's the outcome I'm committed to. And then you say, well, what does doing look like? Where does it happen? So what's the very next action about mom's birthday? What's the very next action about the bank? Is that a phone call to make? Is that a surf the web to find out something? The third thing you need to do is you need to park the result. Otherwise, it goes back in my psyche.
The final 2 steps, David says, are to review those lists that you make, those parking lots for your tasks and your projects, and then, of course, to do them.
The big secret here about getting things done is it's not really about getting things done. I am now free and clear in my head to let my attention go where it wants to go or where I want to put it. It's about being appropriately engaged with your life.
And once you stop trying to keep all of those tasks and projects in your head and you quiet the jabbering monkeys, you'll find that you have increased capacity to think and be creative.
Okay, so can you hear me again? I changed the mic back. Awesome. Thank you, Trudy, Maria. So ultimately what they're talking about, to-do lists are great, right? We're talking about being more organized, being more intentional in these times, understanding where your time should go, what assignments are coming up, maybe more work has been added onto your plate to kind of make up for the difference of being in person and now working online. So you have a lot of stuff going on. But if we're trying to reduce the stress from all of these new things, we have to answer those questions for our brain that it's constantly wondering. What's the next thing? What should I do with this? Why am I doing this? Where is this material? How long am I doing this for? Those are all questions that need to be answered, but they can easily be answered if you just start writing them down proactively. And so that's where to-do lists can be really helpful if you hack the to-do list to make you more efficient, more effective. First piece, be specific. So just like what they were saying, don't just write down work on econ homework. Write down for how long. Write down specifically which assignment you're going to want to work on at that time. And it might be multiple different pieces, but at least if you have work on econ and then you have like sub bullets for read first chapter, you finish that, great. You still have 30 minutes that you were supposed to be working on econ. What's the next econ assignment that you can start working on? Break up, and this starts to get to break up big tasks. So it could be like what I just talked about, where I'm using my calendar and I'm putting which subject I'm going to study for a day and a certain block of like 4 hours. And within that, I say, you know, read the first chapter, work on the rough draft of a paper, and finish my like calculations. You might get 2 or 3 of those done within the 45 minutes that you had allotted. And so you can start to cross off those small sub bullets within a larger topic. Or if you have a class where the end of the year is a 20-page research paper, that's a huge assignment. There's a lot of things that are involved with that. It's going to take multiple hours and days probably to complete that assignment. So instead of work on paper, right? And then sub-bullet between do research for my first argument, do research for second argument, third argument, do rough draft for my introduction, do the rough draft for my first argument. Every single one of those could be a sub-bullet within a larger task. And every one of those pieces, especially if you start adding dates, times, the amount of time you want to work on it, all of that starts to answer all of those little questions that your brain is constantly trying to answer for you. And again, it streamlines your thought process. It's already determined for you. And so that starts to lower your stress levels because there are less and less things that you're always worried about, that you're always trying to find the answer to. The last piece with to-do lists is to be able to prioritize. If we're going to be more diligent with to-do lists, we're going to be more specific. That means our to-do lists are going to grow. They're going to get longer. And that can be stressful in itself, where instead of having an 8-item to-do list, now you have a 20-item to-do list. But at the same time, if we're writing more things down and we're being more diligent, we might put, number 18 on our to-do list is a really important thing, but I might lose it in this long list of 20 things. And so I need to be able to figure out a way to get item 18 closer to the top of that to-do list, because typically my brain functions where it gets focused on those maybe top 5 things on my to-do list, and I work down the to-do list. Occasionally I'll scan it and I'll see something and I'll pull that one thing up, but for the most part I work kind of on a numbered list basis. We need to figure out how to get 18, which is the most important thing, up to the top 5. And really that's where prioritization comes in. And so what we're going to be spending the next pieces of our time is really moving past these basic methods, which are a little bit more organizational. We 100% need those. They're going to be so beneficial in these times, but being able to prioritize our time is what's going to make us most efficient and effective. So the first method is a video, and it's called Eat That Frog. So I'm going to share my screen again.
Here's a little food for thought. There's an old saying that says, if the first thing you do when you wake up each morning is eat a live frog, nothing worse can happen for the rest of the day. Now, I don't know about you, but I think that's a pretty safe assumption. Well, Brian Tracy has said that your frog should be the most difficult task on your things to-do list. The one you're most likely to procrastinate on. Because if you eat that first, it'll give you energy and momentum for the rest of the day. But if you don't, if you let him sit there on the plate while you do 100 unimportant things, it can drain your energy, and you won't even know it. William James, one of the founders of modern psychology, said this: procrastination is attitude's natural assassin. There's nothing so fatiguing as an uncompleted task. So, with that said, here's your assignment for the next 30 days. Take a look at your list. Circle the frog. Eat that first, and you'll thank us for it.
Okay, so you should be able to see my screen again, the PowerPoint, and hear me, hopefully. Thank you, Trudy. So Eat That Frog is one way to prioritize specifically large tasks. And so, as the video said, we all have a frog on our to-do list. It's something that we've been pushing off, that is going to take a lot of time, usually a lot of effort. It's more difficult, whatever it might be, right? It's something that we don't want to do at all. And so when we put it on our to-do list, we see it when we sit down to study, and we're like, nah, I don't want to deal with that. I'm going to look at 20 other little things, and I'm going to get those done because those are easier, they're more satisfying, they're not as hard. I don't have as much anxiety around those other things. And so then we rewrite our to-do list a week later, and the frog is still on there. We rewrite our to-do list a week later, and the frog is still on there. Until it gets to a point where we have a week before we have to get this 20-page research paper done, And then we have no more luxury of procrastination. We have to do it, but it's a huge daunting task at this time. And oftentimes it's right before finals, and we're already stressed out because we have 3 and 4 other tests. So Eat That Frog really is a way to break up really large tasks over many small periods of time. Every time you sit down, work on that task that you don't want to, work on that frog for like 30 minutes right off the bat. Get it done for 30 minutes. You'll make a little bit of progress, but you're not going to finish or even make significant progress. And that's totally fine, because you're going to then move on. You're going to move on to something else. But then you're going to do this every time for the next 2, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, and doing 30 minutes at a time. That's going to accumulate over a period of time. So then when it's a week out from your paper being due, because you've accumulated 10 different days of working 30 minutes here, 30 minutes there, it didn't stress you out during the time. But then now when you actually have to do it, you've already done all your research. You've already written the first draft, or like a proof of half of your paper. So now all you have to do is write the first draft of the second half of your paper, and then edit. As far as stress goes and productivity, I can manage that a lot better than if I sit down 5 days before it's due and I say, holy cow, I have to write a 20-page paper. That makes me anxious, and that adds a lot of stress and pressure to me. And so eating that frog, little moments every time, can make up a big difference. Are there any thoughts or questions about how any of these methods that we've talked about already could be implemented in what you do? Okay, so this is where it starts to get a little harder. Usually we do these workshops in person, and I would actually have a worksheet for you all to do, and so we could do this together and we could debrief it and all of that. But unfortunately, it gets a little harder to do that online. And so what we're going to do, these are just 2 different methods, and we're just going to talk about them, but they're really simple for you to put into practice. The first one, it's called the ABC method. Alan Lakein, or Lakein, is who came up with it. Essentially what it is, you have that 20-item to-do list. What you want to do is break up the to-do list and write down each item into one of these 3 categories. So you start with category A, and from your to-do list, you write all of the things that are that must get done as soon as possible. They're high priority, very important, critical items, deadlines are coming up, must get done as soon as possible. Once you've written all those to-do list items in column A, you move to column B, and then you write medium priority, things you would like to get done but aren't essential. And then column C is really just anything that's left on the to-do list. There are things you want to do. You'll have to do them at some point, but there's not really necessity. It's not essential. There's no time parameters on it or anything like that. What we hopefully get by doing this is your 20-item to-do list, which is really daunting, now gets broken up into 6 or 7 things into column A, 6 or 7 things into column B, and like 4 or 5 things into column C. I can now work with a manageable list of things, and I can say, ooh, I didn't know that 18 was essential and had to get done as soon as possible, but now it's in column A. And so I'm able to go through column A and be like, ooh, I can now prioritize these really easily. And it's broken up a to-do list into some 3 manageable categories. So that can be a really great way to try to organize your time and prioritize really important items. The next method that I want to talk about is a similar way, but instead of necessary or essential, which can be subjective, I can place a lot of weight on a task when in reality maybe that's not true. So I do have the ability to kind of lie to myself about this. This quadrant method, we do it based off of importance and urgency. So importance, what is the negative consequence to procrastinating or to not putting in your full effort into whatever this is? And then you also weigh what is the time sensitivity of that task. Is it urgent or not urgent? And so you place all of your items from your to-do list in one of the 4 quadrants. The nice thing about this is that it's really hard to lie to yourself. You know, you can say important, not important, but if you weigh, you know, 2 different tasks against each other, and you have like study for a test that's tomorrow and work on an assignment that's due in 4 days. Well, in the other method, I could add a lot of importance into that task that's due in 4 or 5 days. And so that would naturally rise on my scale. But when I weigh those 2 different pieces against each other, I start to see, no, right now, the most important thing for me to work on is to study for that test. And so it takes away a lot of my bias into this process. And the other nice thing about this is if you're in finals week, and yeah, you have a lot that has to get done in a very short period of time. You have 5 days to start studying for finals and all the way through taking, you know, your first 2 assignments, your first 2 finals. You can put everything from your to-do list into the 4 quadrants. You might still have a very long list in quadrant 1, which is most important, most urgent. But you can take that list and do quadrants again and break that into 4 groups, because you're just comparing task by task. And you could do it 2 or 3 different times to really find out what is the most important and most time urgent thing that I have to work on right now, even amongst all of these very urgent, very time sensitive things. So again, it answers all of the questions that your brain is constantly asking yourself. What's the most important thing? When are things due? How should I spend my time? How much time should I spend? These start answering a lot of those questions for you. Those are 3 methods for prioritization, but there are many that are out there. You know, simple Google searches will come up with lots of different techniques. Ultimately, I want you to find something that works for you. And so if one of these methods, you were thinking about it and you're like, no, I would never do that, well, that's okay. Maybe one of the other methods would, you know, maybe quadrants would really work for you. ABC rank order really won't. So we want to find a method that works for you and something that you would do regularly. Are there any thoughts or questions about, looking at the chat, when it comes to break times from each big task, when is a break too much? That's a great question. So if we're talking about taking regular breaks from larger tasks, things like that, to some degree, it's really case by case. It's dependent on the amount of time you have. Like, do you have 4 days to finish that? Do you only have 2 days to finish that? So you do have to start to weigh in situational pieces there. I think what's really important, though, is to remember, and this is a different time management technique. It's called the Pomodoro technique. It's where you, in an hour period of time, you study for 45 minutes and you take 15 minutes of a break. And a break it's just to get away from whatever you're focusing on. Maybe that means you actually stand up and walk around and you just completely take a break from that. Or maybe you move to a different task for 15, 20, 30 minutes. And then you're able to come back because you've kind of refreshed your brain and you're ready to go. So it depends on what we're doing and how you want to implement this. I would say you have to know yourself. For me, if I have a long study day and I have a really big task that I'm working on, if I spend longer than 15 minutes on a break, it's going to be really hard for me to get back into whatever I'm doing. So I try not to take any longer than a 15-minute break, um, unless I'm literally taking like it's lunch break. Well, that might be an hour, but I kind of need that, right? But if it's just some small breaks over a 3-hour study session, I would try to keep them around 10, 15 minutes at most, um, so that I don't kick into this like lazy, you know, just unmotivated. I've already taken my brain out of study mode, and it's hard for me to get back in. Does that answer your question? Awesome. Great. Are there any other questions about any method we've talked about? Other pieces with time management? I do want to highlight a lot of the resources and the efforts that TCU is going to still provide the experience. There was a question that was just put into the chat, and it says, will we have access to this video after the session? Yes, that's why we're recording it. And we'll talk about it in a second, because that has to do with the website that I was just bringing up. So TCU as a whole has created this website, and many different departments on campus have started to put their services and programs online. We want you to know that TCU, even though everybody is separate, that we are here for you. We are still connected. We are support for you. And that's where a lot of the questions on like what's available, is this still an option online? What are things to help me through stay-at-home orders, studying, all of those things. So if you go to TCU Student Activities, their website, and literally you can just Google search TCU Student Activities. It's the first link that comes up. On their main page, there's a button that says TCU at Home. When you click on that, it brings you to this page. And you have a couple different sections. So first off, what to do at TCU is still active, and departments and groups are posting advertisements for events that are coming up. All of the Zoom activities there's going to be a Zoom link in those. So that's still the best place to find all of your info. So this has a link to what to do at TCU there. The things that you can do at any time. We understand that sometimes we need just a break from being at home. We need a brain break because sometimes it's hard for us to leave. We need to feel connected. We need to de-stress. We need to distract ourselves, to have fun, whatever it is. So if you look at that, there are different categories around like move and be mindful. Each one of those in that little subcategory is a link to a website or to videos or whatever it is around that topic. So you'll see a meditation, be mindful. Those are links to websites that have multiple different guided meditations, mindfulness activities that you could do. It has, some at-home workouts pieces. There are some enjoy. If you look at the enjoy category, TCU has created like TCU pictures and then converted them to be coloring book options. So they're things that you could print off at home, or you could, write on them with a stylus pen on your computer, whatever it is. And so you can color like Frog Fountain. So there's a lot of options there, so you can browse those. What I want to highlight though is the virtual support services. So when you click on that Learn More button, that'll take you to a page that has all different links for counseling services, academic services, the Career Center, Campus Life. The Rec Center is doing at-home classes, like at-home exercise classes, both pre-recorded and live versions. And so all of these are links for you to be able to connect into whatever those virtual services are for these individual departments. If you look at academic services websites, they have multiple handouts and web pages that they've created that talk about a lot of the things I talked about. Their tip sheets, their bullet points for how to create an effective workstation, how to avoid procrastination, how to study for online exams. So that's kind of maybe a different method than what you did before. So academic services can have, has on their website a lot of great information, and this is the best place to access all of it because it's kind of a catch-all for all of those options. The What to Do at TCU YouTube channel. And so on YouTube, if you were to search What to Do at TCU, there's also links on the What to Do website for the YouTube channel. That's where all of these recordings are going to be posted, along with recordings from other departments that are doing similar things to this. So I did a mindfulness and relaxation workshop earlier in the week. That recording is being posted on the YouTube channel as well. So you can revisit any one of these workshops at any time. So yes, you'll have access to this. It might take a couple of days for it to be posted, but it'll be up there. With that, I am definitely open for more questions, comments, and thoughts. I really appreciate feedback, using the chat to ask questions. That was amazing. And I hope you had a great time with this workshop. Thank you.
Thank you.